Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a lovely day. My name is Kanhiko, and in this following video, I want to talk to you guys about VRM 0, which is VRM Legacy, and VRM 1.0, and what the heck are they? Should you use VRM 1.0 or should you use VRM Legacy? And the quick answer for you, if you don't want to watch this video, just stay with VSFAvatar, because VSFAvatar is way better than both of these file formats. But even then, you still need a VRM file to convert to VSFAvatar, which is VRM Legacy. I'll say that right now. So quick answer, there you go. You don't have to watch a full video, but if you want to get some more knowledge about it to, I guess, tell your friends about, then keep listening. So basically, VRM, the acronym, there is no official acronym, I believe, but the acronym that I assume is basically stands for Virtual Reality Model. It does not stand for Void Model because VRM did not originate with Void Studio. It may seem like it, but actually VRM existed before Void Studio did. It's just Void Studio decided to use the VRM format, basically. But why do people use VRM? Well, the thing with VRM, the thing is, it gets a little complicated because you have different file formats like GLTF and FBX, for example. But the good thing about VRM is that VRM has a standard. Because the thing with 3D models is that 3D models can get really complicated, basically. And because 3D models can get quite complicated, if there is no standard set in place, it gets a little bit more trickier, especially when it comes to VTubing. Especially with mocap and such, it kind of starts getting a little complicated. And the thing with VRM is that VRM makes it easier for not just VTubers, but pretty much anyone who uses the file format. It just makes it easier for, developing it, implementing it, because it's just, there's a standard, it's a lot more easier and such. It's also easier to debug VRM, unlike, well, VRM 1.0, I got a little issue with you. But VRM overall is just easier to implement for the developer, basically, and also it's also easier on the user to create a VRM file because you just, they require a humanoid rig. There is a standard shader, whether standard if you're a realistic model, or M-Tune or unlit for if you want to look more toon style, basically. And then there's a standard physics and such. Basically, there's a standard with everything with VRM. And that's a good thing. Of course, the downside of VRM is that there's quite a lot of limits. There's quite a lot of limits, basically. Like, you can't use a Poyomi shader, you can't have bone blend shapes, you can't do crazy stuff. If you're using VRM Legacy, you can't use constraints, but if you're using VRM 1.0, you can use constraints, which I'm going to get to the difference between VRM 0 and VRM 1.0. So basically, but you get the point, though, that VRM is a standard. It's easier to implement, easier for the person on the other end to create an avatar, basically. It's just easier overall for both ends. But VRM 0, basically is the old version of VRM 1.0. The thing with VRM overall, they have their own spring bone system for physics. They have, of course, standard shader and all that stuff, basically. They have the basic stuff. But what does VRM 1.0 provide? VRM 1.0, what it provides is that, honestly, not much. Besides them removing vertex colors, besides them changing how they do the whole credit system, which I'm gonna be honest, the way they're doing the credits, because, some people do share their VR models on Void Hub or other sites, basically. I do appreciate how the credits are, and the rules and such. It's definitely pretty nice. But even then, it's kind of the same as VRM Legacy, but it's still quite nice. You can add extra stuff to it. But besides that, they have a new collider, which is a capsule collider for the arms, basically. And besides that tiny little thing, they add constraints like twist bones, which for mine, I have twist bones on my model, but this isn't a VRM 1.0 model. This is a VSFAvatar model, basically. So besides that, and the fact that they did change their physics system, which I'll be honest, if you know how to implement it, it's pretty alright. You can't, there's like some limits that can't be possible with VRM 1.0 because of course things change from VRM Legacy. Like for instance, the gravity or the gravity on the physics, at least I heard from one developer, isn't the same as VRM Legacy, so they have to do something else for the gravity on the hair to be affected and such. It gets complicated. And yeah, I think besides the constraints, the new rule, the new like credit rule thing, to add more stuff, more information to your VRM models and such, and also kind of like a little different way to like turn a VRM Legacy model to VRM 1.0 and all that. Yeah, that's kind of about it, basically. I mean, there's probably some more that I don't know, but at the same time, though, it's kind of like I don't know if slapping on constraints and a new collider and adding tiny stuff, I don't think that. Oh yeah, and also removing normalization. I'm not sure if that's really worthy of being a VRM 1.0 model. They could have done a bit more with it, especially also because considering the fact of VSFAvatar. Now, I'm not saying that please turn VRM into VSFAvatar, because there's a difference between VSFAvatar and VRM. VRM, on the one hand, is a universal file format, basically. It's a GLTF file. On the other hand, VSFAvatar is an asset bundle. It is not a universal file. VSFAvatar files can only be used in Unity. They can't be used in Unreal, they cannot be used in Blender, they cannot be used in Maya. VRM, on the other hand, can be used on Blender, Maya, Unreal, and so on, because it's a GLTF format. GLTF can be used in different programs, basically. Like FBX, but GLTF, basically, So, that's the thing about VRM 1.0. In all honesty, the update is kind of weak, in my personal opinion. I'm sorry to say that, but it is kind of weak. It's still good, though, because they did add the constraints and stuff, for native, I guess. But even then, not many programs actually have implemented VRM 1.0. Now, I am noticing that slowly but surely, because a lot of the VTuber programs are either using 2019 or something like that. I think they're using 2019, but there are many that are going to 2020 or higher, basically. So basically, with VRM 1.0, I am starting to see more and more programs supporting it, but I have been hearing so many times that developers are struggling to implement VRM 1.0 because I think they're struggling with like IKs. For example, I think VMagic Mirror was struggling so much on the IKs. VNyan, for instance, is struggling on the optimization because VRM 1.0 lags a lot, especially with the physics. The more physics you add, the more laggier it gets and all that, and it's just a mess. So I'm not sure. There's probably more to it. I even heard this other project as well, which I'm gonna not say their name for NDA purposes. But this other project, they also kind of struggle on the VRM 1.0 stuff. I mean, it still works on their end, but optimization, IKs, and all that, it gets crazy. It just gets all. So you basically get my point. VRM 1.0 isn't really as amazing as it seems. It's just a tiny update. They change a lot of other stuff, and it's actually quite a little tricky on the developers. I mean, again, I have been seeing developers having successful implementation because after some time, the developers, VMagic Mirror is able to have proper VRM 1.0 support. VNyan, it's going to take some time, but I've been seeing a lot more programs supporting VRM 1.0, and that's nice. It's definitely nice, but even Zenzo, at the same time, if you are going to be using like programs other than VSeeFace or VNyan as your VTuber program, for instance, yeah, it would be recommended to use VRM 1.0 as those programs do not support VSFAvatar, because again, VSFAvatar is not a universal file format. And technically, for any dev hearing, I highly doubt dev is hearing, but technically, a developer who is using Unity can implement VSFAvatar in their own program. Now, of course, there are maybe some reasons why someone may not implement VSFAvatar. For instance, Waterdo, on the one hand, they can't implement VSFAvatar because of their animation system, because VSFAvatar collides with their animation system, therefore it doesn't make it work, so they have to make their own file format that's similar to VSFAvatar, but for their program, the Waterdo file format. For example, just laying that out there, why VSFAvatar is also not a universal file format. It's because it's an asset bundle, and also depending on the program, they may not be able to properly implement it, basically. I mean, again, developers are allowed to implement VSFAvatar in their own program. That is okay. There's an SDK for it. But even then, the big majority, VRM, takes the win, basically. So what I would personally recommend, if you're trying to figure out which one do you use, VRM 0 or VRM 1.0, just stick with VRM 0. Stick with VRM Legacy. It's just easier for you. It's just technically, well, it's not really better as a VRM model itself, but it's just easier for you. But definitely don't be afraid to like keep updates on Twitter, because especially most Twitter's about because most VRM updates are on Twitter basically, and I'll also try my best to retweet as well. But there is the VRM Twitter, you know, the Twitter page basically. I'll make sure to link it down below so you can follow them and such, so you can basically get updated on stuff and all that. I'll put resources below if you want to have more information, especially their GitHub. Their GitHub, you can definitely check it out, as they have their roadmap, and you can even report bugs and all that, so that's where you should report stuff and features for VRM 1.0 to hopefully help them make it better as best as possible. Again, remember VRM 1.0 and VRM Legacy, they are sticking with their standards, so you can't act stuff like so I will say you can't ask for like crazy particle system or crazy custom shaders. No, they're not gonna do that. They're gonna stick with their standard, but you can still, you know, ask other questions, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying my best to explain it, but either way, you can just ask questions there, though. Like, don't be afraid to ask, but just be in mind, just keep in mind that they do, you know, you can't ask for a little too crazy stuff. It kind of depends. I mean, you can ask stuff about URP shader support, for example, or HDRP shader support, I guess. That's been a discussion also for VRM, but you can't ask stuff like what VSFAvatar technically has to a certain degree. I hope I'm making sense. I'm sorry for rambling. But either way, resources are down below. Check them out. But stick with VRM Legacy. And besides that, you could have an alternative model. Like, I personally have both VRM Legacy and VRM 1.0 to experiment. So, might as well have both if you can. Otherwise, just stick with Legacy for now. And just keep an eye out for any VRM 1.0 updates for the program that you're using. And hear, like, do they implement it? Did they improve and such? And if not, just stick with VRM Legacy. If by any chance you use VSeeFace or VNyan, you are way better off using VSFAvatar. There's also VTuber Plus. Just use a VSFAvatar file. It's just much more better. You can do a lot more with a VSFAvatar file. Sadly, yes, VSFAvatar is not a universal file format, but if you use VSeeFace or VNyan, you can definitely utilize VSFAvatar and such. If you're using programs like Warudo, you don't even have to use a VRM file, actually. You can just take your FBX and convert to a Warudo file, but just keep in mind of some bugs that might happen. But either way, you could definitely do that with Warudo. There's also animes, but they have their own stuff. I don't know about that. I haven't tried the program, and even then it's like, to me. But either way, I hope that this video helps at least understand what the heck VRM 0 is, basically, and also VRM 1.0, which they are just a humanoid standard for virtual reality models, or otherwise mostly known for VTubing, basically. That's pretty much about it. And I still say that VSFAvatar is still a better file format than VRM, but I'll still have all three of them. I'll still have a VSFAvatar file, VRM 0, and the VRM 1.0 model, just so I can like switch between them depending on which program I'm using. And also because I like testing stuff. But either way though, hope you guys have a lovely day. If you have any other questions, please let me know down below. And if by any chance I accidentally miss any information, or I said something wrong about VRM Legacy or something like that, then please let me know, because I'm only told what I'm told. So if anyone has more information about VRM 1.0 especially, please let me know. Any updates and such, if they did changes, please let me know so I can be aware of it and I can definitely share the news to everyone else. But with that being said, hey, sayonara everyone. I hope to see you guys next time, okay? Bye bye!